Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Super excited to be back again. Right now, we have three very exciting companies doing amazing things in Africa. And this topic is about the next generation of cross-border payments in Africa. And with us today, we have Emmanuel Babalola, Director at Binance Africa, also I think CEO of Bundle. We have Mr. Elendu Uche of ZoneSwitch doing amazing work on the continent. And also we are expecting Elizabeth Rossiello, founder and CEO at AZA Finance. So, gentlemen, just to kickstart this panel, can you briefly tell us about your companies, organizations? And I'll start with you, Elendu. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, NX. Thanks, NX, for the introduction. So my name is Elendu Uche. We obviously run ZoneSwitch. So ZoneSwitch is basically what we do. We provide a blockchain. We have a blockchain network, which is like a layer one blockchain network that connects financial institutions, right? Enabling them to transact with one another in country and between countries. We are noteworthy. We are so far the only blockchain network that has integrated to it a banking stack, a core banking stack that enables us to on-ramp banks and not just big banks, but OFIs, the smaller banks or institutions that service the financially excluded. Because we believe strongly that for the value for the continent as a whole to feel the impact of blockchain technology, there has to be wide adoption, right? And we know that there is a huge percentage of financially excluded individuals on the continent. Traditional blockchain networks typically target end users. And of course, for an end user to use that, you have to be digitally savvy. You have to sort of be a crypto native. But the majority of users here in Africa are not crypto natives. They're not digitally savvy. They still they're not able to manage wallets on their own. They don't understand private key, all that stuff, right? But they will feel the impact of the tech, right? So we're basically focusing on connecting banks, smaller institutions, OFIs, new banks, digital banks, those servicing the banks, and plugging them into that network. One of the key things we're doing with the network is we're building the network to support multiple chains, right? Have seamless integration to other chains, because we believe that the future of the next generation payment infrastructure for cross-border payments will be multi-chain. It's not going to be dominated by one chain. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Emmanuel, please.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Good to be here. We at Binance, one of the things we pride ourselves in is in spreading the freedom of money across the world. And today we run the largest blockchain ecosystem on the planet. And within that ecosystem is the Binance.com exchange that everybody knows and uses. That's basically helps facilitate trading of crypto, peer-to-peer trading across Africa. And then primarily today, I focus more on building Bundle. Bundle is a social payments app for cash and crypto. Basically at Bundle, what we are trying to do is revolutionize payments in a way where people can send money across Africa as easy as sending an SMS. And part of that strategy is to go social first. And so we are building this out, and it's been very, very interesting in terms of the journey.
Thank you.
So thanks, guys, for having me.
Thank you. Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for joining.
Hi.
Excited to have you here. Unmute.
Thank you.
So we're just starting off with an introduction from each person. So if you could please give us a quick 1-minute intro, and then we can dive back in. Thank you very much.
Great. And thanks so much for having me. I was at the first conference many years ago when we first started, and just so happy to see this conference keep going every year. I remember when it was just very small in a hotel, and it's awesome to see how this has grown and how the entire industry has just been growing in the last 8-9 years. So I'm the founder and CEO of As a Finance. We were originally called BitPassa, for those of you who remember, in this space, co-founded by Charlene Chen. And we started in 2013. We were the first exchange on the African continent to trade between digital currencies and African currencies. We're also the first exchange ever in the world to trade between digital currencies and mobile money. And since then, for the last 9 years, we've really focused on building the infrastructure to get on, off, and across the continent into all currencies, fiat and digital currencies. And currently, we're about 250 people. We're between all across Europe, the Mideast, all over Africa. And we service mainly enterprise customers who want to buy, sell, trade, exchange, all types of currencies. And we do the treasury, we do the settlement, and we do it all over our own infrastructure. So for a lot of crypto companies in this space, and yesterday we announced our partnership with FTX as well, who's going to be using us exclusively on the continent, for crypto companies and digital currency companies in this space, including our own customers. We provide all the on-off ramps, compliance, regulation, and the trading. And then for those companies that are hybrid between digital currencies and fiat currencies, we are there to provide them with the same. And currently we're the largest foreign exchange provider on the continent that's not a bank.
Thank you very much. Exciting. So I'll start off with the questions. Today, intra-Africa trade stands at probably less than 15%. And this is a challenge for the continent, interoperability and other challenges that we face on the continent. And recently, we've seen the commercial launch of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System in January in Accra this year. How do you see your companies helping out with this intra-Africa trade, cross-border payments, because that is really needed to push the continent forward? So I'll start with you, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody here on this panel, Emmanuel, Elendu, and I might be smiling when we hear about PAPS, because it's almost like we live in another planet, right? Yes, we're excited about PAPS, but that's a company that's a program, I don't even know what to call it, a platform that took a decade just to get to beta, right? Imagine if we had that kind of luxury. So, I mean, yes, it's exciting when it really gets going. Let's talk about it then. But it's something that's super important, and we're always happy to see governments, regulators, and multilaterals be working on this topic. But even more exciting, like this week we launched XAF, so Central African Franc, and we trade XAF against XOF, which is West African Franc. And this trade, ZOF-ZAF, XOF, XAF, is something that's been ignored by banks on the continent for, the beginning of time. And, we need PAPS there 20 years ago. We need PAPS there the last year. We need it going now. So I think while we wait for that to really go live and wait for that to really gain traction, we need startups, we need fintechs in this space raising their hand, trading these currencies against each other. We need them trading digital currencies. We need them bringing in and connecting to the rest of the planet. And I think we can't wait around for the big guys to do it. We have to do it ourselves. And when the big guys do it, awesome. There's tons of room here because there's nobody doing this right now. Yes.
Elendu? Yeah, what's your take?
Yeah, so like Elizabeth said, yeah, it took a while to get off the ground. We know that the African ecosystem, right, is a bit unique. You have the regulators with their own requirements. You have legacy platforms. That being able to get those platforms, and integrate them, it has its unique challenges. But the good thing is it's off the ground. However, in parallel, we've had startups, set up blockchain systems, services that basically do something similar. However, the challenge which we've always had is acceptance, right? Especially within, amongst key players in the regions where the startups as businesses we operate. I think even though PAPS seems to be late, right? I think there's still something we can glean from them. We could leverage. We could leverage and work with PAPS to get the acceptance we need amongst key players, especially regulators in various countries across the continent. All right. And I think the advantage I see, it would help accelerate that acceptance. it would help accelerate interoperability, mostly for also us, the startups. And I think that is a key area of partnership and collaboration with PAPs, right? So I think we should really take advantage of that. Like at ZoneSwitch, we are talking to PAPs, right, to take advantage of that access they have, right, and also help them, because what they really want in the end really is to integrate, traditional banks, new banks, people servicing the financially excluded, including startups, right, that service that segment, and basically connects them to, a gateway that makes it easy for them to, exchange value, with other African countries. So there's a lot of value in that partnership.
Yeah. So, Emmanuel, to take on.
So definitely, I think my colleagues here have basically said, a bunch of stuff around this, which I agree with both of them on. And it's still the one for PASS, right? And while they are trying to work on this profound problem in Africa, which we all know that sending money across Africa has been an issue. Trade in Africa has been an issue, especially when you look at the complete reliance on foreign exchange in terms of countries, currencies that are not even African currencies. So while that problem is, being tackled from that, regulatory perspective, and that infrastructure has been built. I remember the early days of like NIPS in Nigeria, right? Where because of NIPS was built, it served as the bedrock for several platforms. Several of the fintechs today in Nigeria have largely been successful because of that one innovation that happened, government run, right? So I see PAPS as that thing that would serve for the new era of payments in Africa. However, it is very important that, as even Elendu has said, there has to be a collaboration between startups and them. Otherwise, what would happen is it would take them another 10 years to solve the problems that startups are solving today.
Yeah.
Right. The trade in Africa is not going to wait. Right. There is that problem, and merchants are trying to solve that problem. So one of the key things I see, even from my perspective, is the profound solution that blockchain in itself can do for PASS, right? And I know that somehow they are actually looking at partnering with some protocols to see if that would work. Or from our side, it's always going to be collaborative to just see how we can take that off the ground. However, payments in Africa remains a profound problem, and definitely more and more people have to come into the space, whether be it government or individuals actually coming to set up shop and solve this problem with us.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we can all agree that we do need the startups to basically lead and obviously work more closely with the regulators and all of that. Now, another question that I'd like to ask is, again, you're all leaders in the space. So, what are the core challenges you faced when sort of establishing and taking off in Africa? And from all your experiences, you've been around for a long time in Africa, and what could you have done differently? I think, Emmanuel, you dropped off. So the question is, what are some of the core challenges you faced, obviously, when establishing and taking off in Africa, and what could you have done differently? So I'll start with you, Emmanuel.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yes, can you?
Awesome. So 4 years ago, when we actually started pushing crypto from our side in the continent, one of the things we experienced was largely the need for more education for that particular technology. As I think someone mentioned earlier that Africa basically was still in Web 1. So while trying to Web 1 in this context is the offline, right? So trying to move from cash to digital payments has been a profound issue. And here we are telling them to move from this digital to crypto. In our mind, we weren't trying to bank the unbanked, we're trying to Bitcoin the unbitcoined. And to do that, it means we had to basically show them that this new tool can actually solve some of the problems that they had, be it remittance, cross-border payments, and the likes. And what we also did was to help build, easy solutions for them to have access to it, because it's really in the end all about access, helping them, because Africa has largely been peer-to-peer driven, building the best, infrastructure for peer-to-peer trade on the continent, where users can actually go there and actually trade and acquire these currencies that they can use to do business and to trade. So that's kind of like, one of the biggest challenges we experienced at the beginning of our work on the continent.
Okay. And Elizabeth, I know BitPassa now as a finance, so I'm sure it wasn't easy. So what did you face, and what could you have done differently? Yeah. I think you're on mute. I think you're muted. Yeah, sorry.
I could write several volumes on the things that we did in a crazy way in the early days. I mean, we were like the first ever on the continent to do this, and a lot of regulators would ask me, what spaceship did I just step out of? And I remember they would say to me, "Who is Mr. Bitcoin? Tell me who it is." So how do we tax them? And we would get the craziest questions, and we lost patience a lot in the beginning. We were like, "How come nobody understands what this technology is about?" It's wild to see, 9 years later, people jumping on the bandwagon, but still we have some of the same questions, some of the same issues. So I think it's just really about patience and education and longer timelines. I think I still see startup pitches for young companies that are like, "I'll launch in this market and then I'll be in 10 African markets in next quarter." And you think like, yeah, right. Because I think no matter, even if it makes sense, we have to understand how this technology, and most importantly, these products, how do these products that we're offering, whether it's peer-to-peer, whether it's B2B, whether it's foreign exchange, how do they interact with the economies that exist right now? We could talk about the economies of the future where nothing matters and there's no borders, but right now we have balance of payments. We have issues of currency imbalances. We have issues of taxation, the lack of taxation. We have issues of cybersecurity. So these are issues that we have to discuss and deal with, and we have to face head on. And if we hide from them or if we avoid them, I think it just makes the battle harder for everybody else. I think we have to think of what is our situation right now? What is it in the midterm? What is it in the long term? And really work with some of the structures that exist right now. And, we can always be pushing the boundaries of what goes forward. But regulators and governments and banks and any kind of stakeholder like that doesn't want to hear about the future unless they understand what their own place is in it right now and going forward. So I think just kind of understanding what the different stakeholders need to hear to work together.
Fantastic. Elendu?
Yeah. So I what Elizabeth just said strongly resonates with me, right? You're talking to. I remember when we were pitching our network to the banks and the regulator, and the question was, really, you expect banks to use this, right? It was important to understand the problems that they face at the time, right? And then design whatever it is you're bringing to solve those problems on the ground, right? A lot of startups are so focused on the ideal future, right? Which, it may never be that way, right? We have to look at now. So one clearly have learned is understanding the immediate problems, right, in my market at the moment, right? Get my head out of the clouds and, boots on the ground, understand what exactly are the immediate problems of the market. And then, design the solution, right? And come with something that helps them, elevates them. And on the other thing I learned is regulator engagements very early. Sometimes we tend to avoid talking to the regulator, right? But I found that it will be difficult, but if you want to have, lasting impact, you need to engage the regulators and really understand what are the pain points, and you'll be surprised, right? In our own case, the results were surprising actually, and they actually felt, a blockchain network that basically would service institutions and OFIs and people servicing the financially excluded makes a lot of sense to them, and that got them on board.
Fantastic. I mean, I definitely resonate with all the feedback you guys have had, because we've had similar experiences with regulators. At times, it's as simple as using the right words. Instead of using blockchain or crypto, you talk about DLT. Remember, there's one instance where we talked about this where is the blockchain? Where is it kept? In the cloud. Okay, what happens if it rains? So we have all these interesting questions that would come up at meetings, and you'll be like, what's happening? Anyway, just to dovetail on that, one question from the community as we're discussing, which I think is key, has to do with regulators, and you were just touching on that, Elendu. So how are you guys working with regulators? Because in most markets, they are all different. They all have rules in Nigeria, in Kenya. And, you go to each market, you have to adapt. I'm sure, BitPassa, you faced it, Binance. You guys have faced this. Congrats on the Dubai thing you guys just got. Obviously bringing FTX in, each market is different. So how are you guys engaging with these regulators? What has been the experience? And are you making progress? Yeah. I'll start with you, Elendu. Yeah.
Okay, so I think for us, we're making some inroads in regulator engagement in Kenya. We've had good progress so far in Nigeria. So I think I'll speak to how we approach those engagements. I think the first thing really is understanding what the immediate challenges of the industry, right, the financial system there is, and then approach the regulator, on that. And typically, those engagements, of course, would have to come through either key industry players, right? Key industry players right there in that market that we're partnering with, and go up and have those engagements. It's more of a collaborative engagement. It's collaborative in nature because you being new in the market, like in Kenya, for example, we've had to work with key players there, right? Like, for example, in Kenya, you have an association for OFIs, which has over 5,000 OFI members there, right? Partnering and working with those associations and going hand in hand, right, to the regulator is one very, very great way to do that, right? And you're coming as a solution provider, someone that is there to help solve an immediate problem. They're not so particular about whether if the solution is blockchain or not. Like you said, I guess the advice is always stay away from the jargon, right, and focus on the problem, the solution you are bringing. And we usually find, and like in Kenya, we're making good progress there. Yeah.
Okay, Elizabeth, what's your take? Have you guys dealt with regulators and managed to survive?
Well, we listened to them, I learned my lesson. I think originally we had a full page ad out against us when the Kenyan government decided that they didn't like our lobbying. We weren't even operating. So we really learned our lesson early on, and we are always within the regulatory framework, and we don't sneak around, and we go to markets that make sense for us. So our operations changed when the Nigerian regulation changed last January, and we don't go against the regulator. And, we've been licensed in the UK since 2015. We've been licensed in the Bank of Spain and all across Europe since 2017. We have licenses in Uganda. We have work with licensed partners all over across the continent. It's our number one value is to work within the regulatory framework. And that's why the partnership with FTX is so awesome, because they have the same values. So actually, when FTX became the first prudentially supervised exchange, with the UAE license coming straight from the central bank, they're the only one to get it so far. And it's been really exciting to see how a market where, we were in the Abu Dhabi sandbox for several years as a finance. And it was really a long wait until that new regulation came out. And I think sometimes you have to have different markets operating. You have to have a diversified business model. And if you're in this space and you're in the financial services, it's a regulated industry, and you have to work within the framework.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, Emmanuel, you guys are no stranger to regulation. It's a daily battle. So how are you surviving in Africa, and how are you guys doing here?
Definitely. I think the speakers have spoken really well. I think for the most part, a lot of people know about how last year was for Binance, where we got slammed almost everywhere. And, the way we've come from there till now is just reflects how seriously we take some of these values. Definitely understanding that, for us, it's how we can't say DLT and, because it's really crypto in the end here. And, when regulators look at crypto and see, the size of Binance, obviously this is the first person, they would want to directly work with. So one of the things we've done generally is just ensure that our overall strategy is, I think if you remember just a few months ago, we released something called the 10 fundamental rights of crypto users. Basically we did
I think we are facing a challenge, Emmanuel, there with the connectivity. So we will go on to the next question, which is quite interesting here. So last week, something interesting happened. A San Francisco-based digital bank for startups called Mercury suddenly and without warning blocked the accounts of tens of many African startups. There was no warning, there was no alert, and many of them were seriously impacted, particularly because it was end of the month. They had to make payments, all of that. And so I'm curious, does Africa need its own digital bank to support these startups so we don't have these kind of problems in future? I think we have just you, Elizabeth, for now. And
it's
yeah.
okay. This is like the reason why I live my life. I mean, this is like the most important question to me, which is we have to create a solution outside of the international correspondent banking system, because we are just literally slaves to the correspondent banks unless we create a parallel system. And the de-risking, and if you look at it in a positive framework, the de-risking that happened in Nigeria years and years ago was the reason why NIBS and InterSwitch were born. And to this day, I don't know many West African countries that have a 24/7 settlement switch like Nigeria has. And that's because they built an alternative system. And you could say that they were forced to do that. So, let's not always rely on what that looks like. As a finance and, our entire business model is based around pooling. And that means we don't use correspondent bank transfers, almost never. And very early on, we had to pay a regulatory fee in the United Kingdom when we first got our license. And we sent a very rare wire for a couple $100,000, and it was blocked for 12 weeks. And we almost went out of business. And I'll name the bank. It was with Standard Bank. And we got on the stage. I was happened to be at a conference on the stage with Standard Bank. And I was like, find my wire or I'm going to call you out on stage, because it's at a fintech thing. I mean, the crazy behavior that these guys do, cutting people off. We also famously, a couple of years ago, we were licensed in Spain. BBVA decided to freeze every single account owned by a Chinese citizen because there was one AML flag that they were concerned about. So overnight, every single account in the country of Spain that was owned or co-signatory of a Chinese citizen was closed, and they just threw in all the licensed payment companies for the heck of it at the same time. So I mean, we can complain till the cows come home about this, but if we still rely on them and we don't focus on building and participating and investing in an alternate system, we can't complain about it.
Definitely. So, Elendu, we're talking about what happened last week with the Mercury that suddenly closed the accounts of all the banks. And how do we solve that? How do we prevent that from happening? Because apparently it targeted the African startups. It didn't target the European startups. So how do we mitigate that risk going forward? Do we have to create an African-only solution to support them, or and I mean, most of them get funding from those markets, and so they get help. So how do you mitigate?
So I think, like Elizabeth said, it's important that we don't depend on them. And that is part of the infrastructure conversation we're having, right? AppZone has been in business since 2008. It's 2008, that's 2008. And our business really has been focused on building out financial services infrastructure, right, that would service the continent. Part of why the blockchain conversation is interesting, and I'm glad, I'm happy with what you're doing at Interstellar I'm happy with what we're doing. I'm happy with what Elizabeth is doing. And I think we need to consolidate that by ensuring that, and I saw a question in the audience, I think it was the previous session, where the person asked, do we rely on, blockchain chains built by other, run by other institutions or companies, or do we have our own chain, right? It's still related, right? It's important that we create our own infrastructure. We create infrastructure so that we will be able to handle our own banking, our own transactions, leveraging the blockchain infrastructure. Putting it on the blockchain accelerates that process, right? Sure. And that way, we Africa, we would prioritize, right, our own well-being. Sure. Yeah, so that's I believe that is the way to go, really.
Thank you. So, Emmanuel, before you dropped off, the question was really about what happened last week with Mercury, where the African startups woke up suddenly and saw that their accounts were all closed and shut down. So, do we need to have an Africa-only bank? A lot of these guys depend on funding from North America or the West, and they have to keep their money there. But when they are now turned off without warning, it's a huge risk for them operationally, particularly at the end of the month when payments have to be made. So how do you see us addressing that issue within Africa?
Yeah, I think that this just goes to show the need for us to have those infrastructures built for Africans. I remember when PayPal said no Nigerian can use the service, right? Today we still survive, right? Key thing here is really knowing that the problem is fundamental. It's a fundamental problem of us. As Ernest said, they need to get investors. They need to get investments. And when those investments come, they will come in USD most of the time. And we don't have, the proper infrastructure, at least not, as massively as we should, to even house that. There's even the fundamental problem of, why are African investors not even stepping up to actually do this, right, on one side. However, let's look at crypto. Crypto solves this problem in itself, right? Because in the end, whether you're talking of protocols, layer one protocols, or the tokens themselves, the key thing is how crypto profoundly solves that mess. So I see a future where, raising funds, can also be done in a way that is not dependent on the traditional route, right? This is both a short-term and a long-term solution to this current problem that we have. So we have different ways of raising money in crypto, and we have rails like Binance, AppZone Finance that you can use to even off-ramp those funds when you raise them. So there are innovative solutions that blockchain presents. It's just a matter of adoption and providing solid use cases for this.
Thank you very much. So another question that came up from the community, which I think is important. Yes, we talk about technology, innovation, but as Emmanuel mentioned earlier, a lot of Africans, a significant number, are still unbanked. They are not using the latest smartphone, and they're using feature phones. And to use that, there's a cost attached to this. So how do you guys see us addressing the issue of cost? Because it can be expensive, especially when you've spent a lot of money on getting your license, Elizabeth, for example, and you have to get your return on investment. So how do you keep costs low, keep it really affordable while providing these much needed services? I'll start with you, Elizabeth. How do we make sure that we can onboard more than the less than 15% that we have today using these solutions?
Yeah. So before I worked in crypto, I worked in microfinance, and there we saw a very similar trend. We saw users that were in urban or peri-urban areas over indebted. That means they had like 3 or 4 microfinance loans. And we saw users that were in the countryside being ignored. I mean, I think this comes back down to a question of connectivity. There are programs by like Elon Musk and, the UN, like GigaConnect, that are going to go into really, disconnected areas in Niger and Yemi and things like that. And they're going to go in there and get those users online. When I first launched in Kenya, 10 years ago, the level of financial inclusiveness was below 40%, and now it's in the 90s. So I think financial inclusion comes with connectivity. And when the telecoms invest, so countries that have heavy mobile money networks such as Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, you see a higher penetration of internet, and you see a higher penetration of low internet costs per gig. And then I think the problem really becomes when you have mobile money markets that haven't really developed. So like Nigeria really never developed as a true mobile money market. So you didn't have those telecoms investing in rural infrastructure in the same way. Now around Lagos, everybody can get access to financial products and probably is over indebted in some ways. So I think it's really about who's going to build the infrastructure. Mobile money fees are not going to survive, especially as there's a lot more web-based financial service products and P2P products keep growing, especially in the crypto space. So who's going to pay to bring the internet to the rural areas? The markets in the countries that had that done in a great way the last decade were done by telecom. So are they the ones who are still going to be doing it? If not, who are the providers, who are the stakeholders? Is it the crypto companies who decide to do that investment? We haven't seen that yet, but maybe that's the future.
Thank you. And since we are running out of time here, I want to go a little bit quick. So, Emmanuel, can you give us your own response to that in a minute? So,
as I mentioned earlier, Africa does have like bigger issues, especially as Elizabeth said, connectivity. Moving people from Web 1 to Web 2, as I like to say, is a fundamental issue in Africa. Majority of the population don't even have this internet connection to even come online, right? So that is a problem that has to be invested in and has to be solved, right? I see like several innovative solutions, even around KYC, using SMSs to KYC people, in rural areas where they don't even have internet to complete that verification. So there are several layers of the existing technology that I feel we can, use to navigate that problem. But that particular, neglected and marginalized market that hasn't even been backed, I believe there's a profound opportunity for them to actually have access to crypto. If you look at the penetration rates for bank accounts, which because the reason why mobile money is not even that popular in Nigeria is because obviously there's a banking system that works, right? In terms of the infrastructure. Now, if you look at mobile penetration rates compared to that, it's higher because mobile money has a higher rate of adoption. Then crypto is a step further to that. So I believe that crypto will likely get to these guys first. And the key thing is just to figure out ways to innovate around what is available to them. SMS, I think, is a great idea, both for KYC and also for sending and receiving, of this kind of data. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Elendu, 1 minute, you can.
Okay. Yeah. So I think, connectivity is definitely, and that's what you find when, and I understand why Elizabeth says that, because like she said, she has a background in microfinance, and that's really where you see that problem. And I'll refer to what the central bank is doing here. Part of why, like Emmanuel said, mobile money didn't really take off here was it seemed like the traditional banks and MFIs or smaller financial institutions actually started bridging that gap, right? They became more innovative. They literally leveraged, so they created a product. Today we call agency banking, right? Which is this is basically a service where you have a service rep, right, around in your area available to service you, right? The service rep basically has tech and is able to provide banking service to you, right? Now, so you have that, and that sort of had ended up bridging some of the gaps that the mobile money operators would have had to bridge if they did mobile money here. I still see the mobile network operators, right, as a primary provider of the connectivity that we need. We just have to think about the clients we use. I think a lot of focus is on using sophisticated clients, but dumb clients are still an alternative, which is why without understanding, we're saying, hey, why not work with those providers that work with the telcos, leveraging dumb clients like SMS and maybe USSD, right, and connect them to the blockchain rails, right, to basically offer service.
Thank you. I think it's worth noting that I think in December, MTN Nigeria got their mobile money license, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. I have a particularly interesting question here. It's linked around, at Interstellar, we have a tagline, go beyond payments, go Interstellar. This kind of relates to a question from the community here. So we are seeing a shift from fiat towards digital assets. And why we say go beyond payments is because we see the world now moving to value, exchange of value and services. We are seeing the rise of NFTs. Recently, I was told somebody was selling a portrait of me in OpenSea, an NFT. So I know Binance is doing a lot on that already. But I really want to push this question more towards Elizabeth and Elendu. How are you guys really evolving? Are you guys looking at this space in the metaverse, NFTs going beyond just fiat? And because again, I might not have money, but I've got some goats. I want to tokenize those goats and trade them to pay my son's school fees, for example. So how is AppZone, how is Asa Finance addressing this? So Elizabeth, please take this.
Sure. We just announced yesterday a partnership with FTX, which has one of the largest platforms for all sorts of really exciting Web3 products right now, and they keep launching new ones. So with just a few clicks, it's going to be easy for any African user to launch their own NFT, to trade and monetize that. So we're just so excited to operationalize that for FTX, and they'll be able to pay in local currency, just like all the other products that ESA has. So we're bringing that last mile service to the FTX platform. So very soon we're going to be launching country by country. Any African user is going to be able to launch and trade their own NFTs, and NFTs around the world. That's number one. Number two, there's tokenized assets already on the FTX platform, and there's tokenized currency trading. And what we're really excited to do is to make that more specific to the African market. So, as a pioneered African currency pairs, so like ZAF, like I gave before, Nigerian Naira against South African Rand, we have one of the best rates and best settlements for that. So we're going to be bringing those African pairs, also feeding that onto the FTX platform in this partnership. So, watch this space and look at what's going to be coming, because there are these mega platforms all over the world that are doing this, and not all of them are really focused on the African markets. And connecting with us is exactly what the focus is going to be.
Thank you very much. Elendu, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so for us, right, the focus at the moment has been, and still is, right, having that network, connecting more and more institutions. Already in Nigeria, we have over 14 institutions already, and these are the biggest banks, right? And we have an additional 400 OFIs currently connecting, all at different stages of connecting to that blockchain network, right? So that's already a huge spread. Now, however, what we're doing actively towards that direction is making sure our blockchain network, right, is interoperable with the other existing blockchain networks today. We haven't approached Binance to begin that integration, but they are on the roadmap, right? We would not immediately be offering those tokens, but we'll be providing access to it, right, through our blockchain. So you don't have to leave our blockchain network, right, to access those assets, to trade those digital assets. You could basically trade them through our blockchain, and back and forth.
Thank you. Emmanuel, I know you guys are already doing it, but can you just throw something real quick for a minute?
Yeah. Personally, I believe that one of the key use cases that will drive crypto in the next year would be things that allow people who do not have capital to trade to still get involved. Things like GameFi, play to earn platforms, things like SocialFi, places where you interact and you earn income from there. Things like NFTs will begin to take off. So definitely these are things that we are very passionate about. And at Bantu specifically, some announcements are coming up very soon to drive this goal, for us on the continent.
Okay, thank you very much. And so, because our time is up here, I'd like to just move into quickly closing comments. Elizabeth, I'll start with you, especially as a female in the space. I was hoping to ask you about how other women could follow in your space. You've inspired so many, but the numbers still remain really low. So in your closing comments, could you please help us address that, how we can get more women involved in the space? They contribute to the African economy, but they are not that visible. So just in your closing comments, please help me address that. Thank you.
Sure. And, a lot of guys ask me, oh, that can't be true. It's not still happening. And then they come to meetings with me and they can't believe the things that people say in my face. Even 20 years working in finance. And my male colleagues are like, what was that meeting? I cannot believe the guy just said that. Or like, I'll say something and they'll say, it can't be true. And then my colleague will say the same thing and they'll be like, okay, great idea. I mean, that still happens every single day. It's bonkers. And that means less investors trust what you say. Less partners believe you're going to deliver the volumes, and they just constantly are underestimated and undervalued. So ladies, it's just like correspondent banking. We got to build it ourselves and build an alternative model. So as a finances partnering with a really cool executive coaching and training and mentoring studio out of Senegal called Beautiful Soul. And we have a huge program with several hundred mid-level West African women where we are doing workshops, we're doing online mentoring, we're doing internship programs, and then it's an entire pipeline to hire into our mid-level managers. So we're putting our money and our time where our mouth is. And so why don't you guys go on LinkedIn and you can check out As a Finance and our Women in Finance program. And we're just so excited to support African women who are looking to get into the financial sector and who also are looking for mentorship and looking for opportunities and to grow. And I think we're all got to just put that ladder down and help each other out.
Thank you very much. Elendu, 1 minute, closing comments, please.
Yeah, so I think it's important, and I mentioned this earlier. It's important to know that I see the payment infrastructure for Africa of the future. It's going to be a multi-chain infrastructure, and therefore we shouldn't approach building out this infrastructure the way the centralized traditional payment systems did. Where they created silos. We should understand that it's a collaborative thing. It's an ecosystem. There has to be close interoperability across all of the various blockchains that operate within the ecosystem. I think in the end, what we should be gunning for, and the key driver here would be how many citizens or Africans will be able to access our service. And when you look at that, you realize that the bulk of the volume fall under the unbanked, people that are not digitally literate, right? So there has to be a very, very, very laser-focused approach, right, to onboarding those that category of users and giving them access, right, to the services that this new network would provide.
Thank you very much. And in closing, Emmanuel, I know you guys have an amazing event happening in Dubai at the end of the month, your first global event. So in closing, I would like to know when you're going to have the African event, so to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Definitely, we're expecting a big African event later this year, so just keep an eye out for that. But generally, I feel that blockchain would actually power the infrastructure, of Africa's payment system, and I see a lot of innovators in the room here, working heavily to give us that future in Africa. I like to always say that blockchain has the most profound use cases here. Use cases that are not related to making money and just in Africa it's a lot deeper for us because people are trying to make the ends meet. People are trying to just get remittance from their son abroad and stuff like that. So it's a lot deeper for us here, and solving the key issues here using this technology, I think would go a long way in opening up a lot of opportunities for the continent.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'd like to appreciate all of you once again for being part of this very informative panel. And I'd like to thank Blockchain Africa Conference, Sonia and the team. And let's keep doing the magic, guys. Thank you and have an amazing weekend.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye, guys.
See you.